There's nothing I can do. I'm so tired, I don't think I can keep myself up anymore. Before I fall asleep, I want to tell someone what happened. No, I need someone to know the truth. This is my last message, so please, let me tell you my story. 14. It began 2 weeks ago, when my coworker Ari told me that 3 days without sleep was all it took to kill a guy. I scoffed. Listen, I'm in college. I stay up practically every night throughout the week. No way someone could die from just 3 days pulling all-nighters. I'm telling you, man, there's been plenty of research. Look it up, 3 days and you lose your mind. I challenged Ari to a bet. Whoever breaks their sleepless streak first has to take the early shifts for a month with our least favorite team member, G. When G spoke, it was always in paragraphs, mainly consisting of the words I, me, and myself. Combine that with morning coffee and a voice like television static, and you could guarantee a headache during the 5:45 to 11 a.m. slot. 11. The first few nights were easy. Truly, just 3 days was laughable to me. Sure, I was tired and my eyes felt dry and overused as hell, but more in the daytime than at night. Ari and I called throughout the night to prove our sleeplessness, and I used my newfound time to finish coursework. I found I had plenty of time after to endlessly scroll on social media or play games, and time sped by me. When driving to work, the daylight forced me to wear sunglasses because of how sensitive my eyes were to the brightness. Along with that, when I blinked, it took me a few seconds to lose the blurriness and focus. However, it was all manageable, and when the third day passed, I gloated cheerfully at Ari. See? Told you so. No crazy here. He grimaced. I don't know. I can't focus on anything really, and I keep feeling really uncomfortable. Like I'm being watched all the time. Even my clothes feel like they're suffocating me right now. I shrugged. Well, the quote being watched over unquote is probably from G, who's glaring at us for spending 5 seconds too long on break. Motherfucker thinks he's a manager or something. R.A. looked pretty tired and kept yawning throughout the day. I reminded him he could quit whenever, with a grin. To be honest, I felt pretty out of it too, but the idea that I could rub this in R's face made me giddy. Looking back, perhaps it was the deprivation making my already asshole self even more manic. I chuckled to myself out loud more than I'd like to admit, even when Ari wasn't talking to me. 9. 5 days in, I lost Ari. During our late night call, my scrolling trance was broken by a violent crunch coming from his side. It was a terrible, hair-raising noise like watermelon being crushed under a truck. I felt the color drain from my face. Ari, you good? I called out. No answer. I freaked the fuck out. I called out his name louder and louder until I was screaming. I was shaking from dread, but I managed to hang up and call the police. By the time I drove over, he was gone. They didn't bother to put his body in the ambulance, and softly informed me he was dead on arrival. What the hell happened? A break-in? I sputtered. The police officer shook her head and looked down. She stated what would soon become their official statement. He quietly passed away in his sleep. They asked me a couple of questions. I didn't know his family or other friends. I was his co-worker at I showed them my location tracker app, which showed me at home at the time of the incident, as well as the drive over. I told him he stopped responding on call, and I was worried because I knew he lived alone. They told me they would contact me if need be, possibly after an autopsy and forensics. They also provided me with contact information for support resources. I don't even know how I managed to drive home. I sat on the curb of my driveway for a few hours, silently. Mosquitoes came to feast, but I didn't feel a thing. I remember wishing the curb would just slide me away, down the gutter, into the sewers, till I was washed away into nothing. I sat there, numb, until the sun came up. 7. I couldn't sleep for 2 days after that. Even if I wanted to, I was given leave from work and school, and I stayed alone at home, missing a couple of meals. I didn't tell my family, who lived states away, about ours passing. I didn't return my friends' calls or texts. It felt like ours death was my fault, and my emotions split between anger and fear. It had to be the sleep deprivation, right? Wasn't I responsible? Why didn't I tell the police about the sound I heard that night? What was it? I could barely close my eyes, with these thoughts pounding in my head as though threatening to burst through. As irrational thoughts circled in my mind, I spiraled into despair, curling into a ball on the floor. Blinds closed, I couldn't tell day from night. My body and mind wanted me to rot away, and I listened. Lying there on the cool wood floor, some tears lubricated my aching eyes, and I let sleep take over me. 6. I woke up with a jolt and many strange sensations all at once. Damp moss under my hands, the sounds of wildlife, and the petrichor from rotting bark filled my senses. The rain was light enough it felt more like a fog misting my face. My eyes adjusted to the sparkling night sky, and I found myself in a forest that I was a stranger to. Before I had time to think, a thunderous thump reverberated through the ground. It was heavy enough for some branches to fall from the trees. Then another one, closer. I scrambled to pull myself up. I was nearly flung back to the ground by another thud. Closer. I gasped and ran to the side, hoping to get out of the way of whatever that thing was. I hugged the trunk of a tree, stabilizing myself as I tried to discern the direction of the monstrous movements. Suddenly, they stopped. I held my breath as though that would keep me safe. Gripping the tree for life, I desperately tried to make out anything in the sky above. Only then did it dawn on me that I couldn't see the stars anymore. Before I had time to react, the tree surrounding me crushed into my body. I screamed and felt myself lifting up into the air, in a fistful of terrain grabbed by the monstrous being. My legs were caught between two tree trunks, and I felt them crunch along with the branches. It hadn't nabbed me quite in the center of its grip, so my arms and torso were dangling to the side in the air as it pulled me up. Desperate to wiggle myself free, I yelled in pain as I pulled and dragged the rest of my body away from my mangled legs, and I finally began to tilt and fall back towards the ground. I began gaining speed as I dropped, hurtling towards the ground below me when... 5. I woke up in a cold sweat on my floor. What the fuck was that? It felt so fucking real. I could still remember my legs stretching and tearing off as I pulled myself away from that thing. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and got up. Well, I tried to get up. To my horror, my legs didn't respond. They looked fine, but as I massaged them with my hands, I couldn't feel a thing. As my mind desperately commanded them to move, they didn't even twitch. It felt like I was trying to move rocks with my mind, and fear filled me as I began to think I'd forgotten the magic command my brain would usually say to move my legs. I prayed it was sleep paralysis, but the hands on the clock kept moving while my legs did not. It took me a bit to get over my panic, but eventually I dragged myself over to my kitchen, my growling stomach still sending signals to my brain. For once, I was glad my on-campus housing was a small one-floor place. I drank some bottled water from the pack I left under the kitchen island and hoisted myself up slowly using the chairs. For once, I was also glad that the chairs were bolted down. I ate some bananas from the fruit bowl. Once seated, I moved my legs to a visually comfortable position. Seeing them twist and catch on each other as the tops of my feet dragged across the floor had frightened me. One who had lived so long expecting them to carry me forward forever. I had my phone in my pocket and pulled it out. How long was I out? I was shocked to see I had been sleeping for a whole day. I contemplated calling the police for help, but I was afraid because I wasn't completely honest about what happened to Ara. Unreasonable, I know, but my heart wouldn't stop pounding when I tried to dial those 3 numbers. I decided to call my family. I told them I was struggling here and that I had gotten a leg injury that made it difficult to move. They told me they'd take a day off and book a flight over when they could, and I thanked them and hung up. I wish I had told them that I loved them, not to miss me too much. Now, I'm glad they won't be here in time. Exhausted from hauling myself up to the countertop and shrunken stomach content with the meal, I closed my eyes as the oversleep drowsiness lulled me to sleep again. 4. Sharp, overwhelming pain coursed through my body, along with adrenaline and shock. In moments, I knew where I was, same forest, same night sky, same trees crushing my legs. I was still in its grip, legs mostly attached to my body. Unlike last time, I yanked myself apart and dragged my body away early enough to have a survivable fall to the ground below. I could hear the trees continuing to crack and splinter in its grip as it brought it up high, perhaps inspecting it. Now that I knew it could see in the dark, and also due to my low mobility and depleting strength, I rolled into a small recess in the ground and covered myself as best as I could with soil, moss, and dead leaves. As I lay deathly still and quiet, a shrill screech echoed through the air, blowing back the trees. Fudge shook the ground so close that I was bouncing up and down. I sobbed in fear, stifling my mouth with my fist, leaving deep indents on my finger. A step flattened the trees and foliage to my side, about 3 feet away from my body. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please, 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 I prayed for the first time. I begged for safety, feeling my consciousness flutter as I felt the pool of blood deepen. When I opened my eyes, I saw a figure in the darkness, sitting down with his back on a tree across from my hiding place. My blood ran cold and I didn't feel pain anymore for a moment. It was Ari, not in life, but in death. His skull and body were crushed to a gut-wrenched, bloody mess. Yet he was looking at me. I could tell. He opened the undistinguishable mash that used to be at his mouth and said, "It's found you." The giant being grabbed me in its hands, this time dead on. It pulled off an arm in a slow, delicate twist and tossed it into its mouth. Then the other. Finally, its pearly teeth glinted in the moonlight for a moment before I was engulfed. I was screaming for help. From Ari, from anyone, when I woke up. 3. I called the police using Siri. They brought me to the hospital where doctors had no clue what to do with me. There was no problem evident, no blood clot, nerve or spinal injury or stroke. They decided to keep me under watch for a few days, monitoring my condition. I told them not to notify my family. I requested a DNR order. At night, when the nurses left my hospital bed, I had time to think by myself. The last dream brought me back in time before my leg injury. Could there be a chance to escape this time? But I knew there wasn't. I had been losing too much blood in the dream world and would only prolong my life perhaps by minutes or seconds. I was terrified to fall asleep, so afraid of death to the creature in my dreams, of seeing Ari again. I begged doctors not to use any sedatives or anesthesia. I pretended to sleep at night when nurses came in to check on me. 1. I kept up my facade for 2 sleepless nights, but I was yawning uncontrollably and often, and it took from a couple of seconds to a minute for my eyes to be able to focus. My dark circles became evident, and the nurses looked ever more concerned for my health. However, soon enough the doctors lost interest in determining a diagnosis as new patients flooded in. By the 3rd day, only 1 nurse looked after me. In the evening, I talked with the nurse after dinner. I learned that she goes to my college, and she was here for her clinicals as a part of the nursing program. I cried, telling her I never thought I'd miss school. So many things I'd taken for granted. She looked at me sadly and asked, "What about sleeping? Don't you miss that?" I shook my head. "I can't. I get nightmares." She reassured me. "Hey, this time will be different, I promise." The hair stood on the back of my neck as fear crept into my mind. "What do you mean?" "I gave you a little melatonin. It'll knock you right into deep sleep and help you relax. Don't worry." She smiled. My face went white, but I held on to a shaky smile. "Hey, thanks." Before you head out, would you mind grabbing my phone for me? So here I am. I can feel the sleep coming. I'm using speech to text, but I hope you all have been able to understand me. I just needed a place to put my story. I don't know who else will believe it. To my family, I'm sorry for not telling you everything. I love you, Mom and Dad. I'm so sorry for dragging you into my stupid bed. I should have listened. It's all my fault. I'll see you.